Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining our program today, the Enterprise Playbook for Technical Hiring. Before we get started, I'd like to do a quick walkthrough of our webinar console. Over on the right-hand side, you will see a Q&A dialog box. We would like to keep today as interactive as possible, so please feel free to ask questions throughout our program and we'll take them as they come in. Also, just below the Q&A dialog box, you will see our resource list. We do have a couple of events coming up and would like to invite you to register for those. They're coming up on November 8th. And also a link to our HackerRank research, which we will be referencing throughout today's program. And finally, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Today we're joined by Vivek Ravisankar, our co-founder and CEO, and Gaurav Verma, VP of Customer Success here at HackerRank. So gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Looking forward and excited to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Great. And audience members, of course, we'd love to hear from you. We'd like to learn a little bit more about what you're facing in your organizations today. So we've got a couple of poll questions that are going to pop up. So the first one we'd like to ask is your 100th engineer as good as the previous 99 that you have hired? So this is a little bit, this is relevant to the hiring process your organization is going through. So I'll give everybody a quick moment to answer this question. We'll take a look at the answers. So again, you see the pop-up window, just select one of those buttons and let's see what we've got. So, okay, the vast majority of you feel like that you've got pretty good teams coming in, a little bit of you not so confident. Okay, so then another question for everyone. Is your talent acquisition team and engineering team aligned? Do you feel like that your hiring process goes smoothly and that you both understand the types of roles you're trying to fill? So again, you'll see a pop-up window and the radial buttons. Okay, give everybody just a moment to answer that. Let's take a look at our answers. All right, so over half of you feel like you've got good alignment across your organizations. That's really good news. A little bit of opportunity for some of the others. So we'll talk about how organizations are doing this successfully today. And finally, are you able to deliver on your diversity hiring goals? So from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, is your organization building out diverse teams? So again, quick pop-up. Give everybody just one moment to answer that question, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the results. Oh, well, we've got 100% saying yes, so not quite sure on the number of people participating in this, but we'll go ahead and talk through some of this. All right, so today we're going to hand this over to Vivek. So Vivek, we're going to be talking through how to standardize hiring processes and tips for improving alignment across the enterprise organization.
Sure. So just a little bit of background. I'm Vivek, one of the founders and CEO of HackerRank. I used to be a developer prior to this at Amazon, where I interviewed a lot of candidates. And one of the challenges that we faced, and most large organizations face, is how do you make sure that you can standardize your recruiting process across the board and continue to increase your bar? Because you're just going to hire more and more engineers, you're going to have a different set of people coming in and interviewing other folks. How do you make sure that you build a standardized process? So we're going to structure this webinar into 3 parts. The first one is what we call as structured hiring. What does a structured hiring process look like? How do you design a good interview process, and how do you implement that? The second one is, now let's say you design a good interview process and implement it, like how do you implement it at scale? And there are certain key functionalities or features that you need in any platform that you're going to work on that needs to be enterprise ready. And third one is, okay, you've designed it, you've implemented it, you've rolled it across the entire organization. How are you going to continue to sustain it at scale? Which is similar to the first question that we asked: is your 100th engineer as good or better than the previous 98 engineers that you've hired? Because guess what? That the 100th engineer is going to continue to interview the next 100 engineers, and you want to make sure that you can retain the bar and brand at scale. So those are the 3 big topics that we're going to talk about that can help in standardizing the hiring process across the organization.
Okay.
And like Laura mentioned, like feel free to chime in with questions on the text box. Is that how they do it? Okay.
Yeah.
If you have any questions on this. So the first one, I just want to begin by saying the reason for me to even start this company was because resumes had a very poor correlation to skills. Everybody claimed that you are an expert on a resume, rightfully so, because why would you say I'm not good at something on a resume? So what really happened was everybody were going after the same small pool of people. That is, if you went to these 10 schools, had this GPA, or if you worked at these 20 companies, that's what everybody were going after if you take in your locality. But there are a lot of developers who are self-taught, and who we sort of miss out on the recruiting process. And we did a survey to our developer community, which is now close to 5 million developers right now, and you can see that over 73% of them identify themselves as self-taught, even though they had a college degree, even though they went to a different school, whether they had a computer science degree or not. The mode of learning for them, how to code, how to build an app, was all self-taught because it's just becoming easier and easier to learn how to code. So the core challenge is the first step of your recruiting process is usually based on resume screen, and that doesn't tell you the whole story. That doesn't tell you what are the skills. So we need to first re-architect the interview process right from the first step on how do you figure out what are the right skills for a candidate. Okay.
Sorry, there's a slight delay on our presentation, so sorry about that. Talking about anatomy of a technical interview.
Yeah, so this is the structured technical interview that we were talking about, and what we call as anatomy of a technical interview. So for every developer who you're going to hire, and we have done research, we work with over 1,200 customers across different industries, different sizes, from a 10-member startup to all the way to a 10,000, 20,000 person organization. And what we have come up with is like a framework of what is an optimal technical interview structure that you can go ahead and design. So we break this into 3 parts. The first core is problem solving. The second one is what we call as a real world challenge. And the third one is system design. And just quickly go over each of them, and then Gaurav can take care of how do you, once you design this, how do you go ahead and implement this. So problem solving, what does this really mean? A technology change happens very rapidly. A new JavaScript framework comes up like every 6 months, and what you knew 5 years back will get irrelevant over time. So problem solving is the ability to test a candidate on their ability to break down a large problem into sub-problems and go ahead and solve it. I mean, that's the core tenet or foundation for any developer to have a very strong foundation of how to code. So that's the first part of problem solving and what that assesses for. The second one is the real world challenge, which is essentially figuring out if this person can do the work that he or she will be doing when they come on board. So if this is, by the way, this is very common in a lot of different types of job occupation. If you want to get a pilot license, you need to show them that you can fly. So the real world challenge is very similar on those lines, which is if you're hiring a front-end developer or a full-stack developer or a site reliability engineer, can you give them a real world scenario which they can go ahead and solve? So that tells you the ability for them to solve in that particular language or framework. And the third one is system design. Okay, so you have really good problem solving or foundational understanding of how things work, and then you're able to build a system as well, the real world challenge. But can you build it for scale? Can you build it that can handle tens of thousands of users and can it scale to 1 million users? Where would it break? And that's what system design focuses on. So at a high level, if you're able to structure your interview process in helping understand a candidate's problem-solving skill, their ability to build a real-world app, and a system design in a very structured way across the board, that can give you, that is what we call a structured hiring. And we have sub-bullets, and we will probably send the slide, or we are happy to share this if you're interested. Tests on all the skills that you want to assess on each of these different topics, on each of these different dimensions of this. So that's the anatomy of technical interview that we've designed. Now, how do you go ahead and implement this? Gaurav, if you want to share it.
Sure. Thanks, Vivek. So absolutely, the team spent a fair bit of time working with companies of various sizes. As you mentioned, we've got startups that are all of 10 people, and they're hiring full stack engineers, right? They're looking for engineers that have a very diverse set of skills, can work on front end capabilities, can work on back end capabilities. But as we work with our larger enterprises, there's a lot more specificity in what they're looking for. But we've also seen practices where they're looking to hire 50 Java engineers. And so the assessment of the skills that you're looking for is just purely language proficiency. There's a better approach that we found that our customers take, is getting very specific to what roles are you looking for, and more importantly, do you have a rubric around what skills are you looking for, and then assessing for those skills versus just looking for language proficiency. What gets really hard for larger enterprises is the amount of fragmentation that's just you get by sheer scale. Everyone is geographically dispersed. There are lots of different product lines, business units, acquisitions, mergers that are happening, and the complexity it just keeps growing for large enterprises. So the approach that we're taking with companies that are 60, 70,000 employees, hiring 4,000 engineers globally across the globe in North America, center of excellences they're building in EMEA, hiring very aggressively in India, and now looking at other places where the skills exist, colleges that are graduating folks with computer science degrees that come with a very specialized skill set. The way they're approaching it, or our recommendation, is to build out a tech council. Rather than have every team go build a set of tests where you then start seeing inconsistency in hiring. If you're hiring a front-end engineer with 2 to 5 years of work experience, the assessment of their skills should be the same across the company, regardless of where you're hiring them. Now, granted, when there will be the hiring team that will say, but I have some very specific nuances that I'm looking for, it tends to be around frameworks or languages that they're using, not around the core skill of a front-end engineer. And so creating a tech council is something that we do with our customers very effectively, making sure there's representation from the hiring team, from all the different hiring teams, and then you coalesce around, let's first go understand what are the skills we're looking for a front-end engineer by experience level, and then let's go then determine what type of questions will give you the right signals, and come up with at least a construct of where 80% is consistent across all these different business units or product lines, and then each business unit can add 1 or 2 questions or pick a language or framework proficiency that they're looking for around those questions. So creating this tech council is a great way to sort of coalesce around, let's go solve a problem, and the problem is how do we assess skills for a specific role within our company and get the consistency you're looking for. It also helps with compliance when you're looking at specific things around content validation, etc. You're not trying to validate 10 different tests, it's validating 1 core test that you can use. Once you put together this tech council, developing an assessment rubric, and I'll go into more details on how you go about developing that assessment rubric, what best practices we've put together that our customers use in terms of having this council develop the rubric before you even start creating an assessment as hacker. And then once you've done that, you have to go develop the assessments. There's several steps involved with that as well. Really lightweight, but making sure that you develop a test and you calibrate it before you actually start giving it to candidates. And then from there, you can start scaling up. So pick 1 or 2 or a cohort of high priority roles, go develop a tech council, focus on it, get the process down right, get some success, and then think about how do you scale this out across all the different roles you're hiring, ranging from I'm hiring front-end developers, back-end or full-stack developers, you're doing DevOps versus site reliability. There are clear nuances of what skills are needed as you start cutting across all those roles. So that's our approach. We'll spend a few minutes giving you a little bit more detail on each of these. And of course, we're happy to answer questions and engage with you one-on-one as well if you want to know more. So let's get into the assessment rubric as sort of the first step. Once you've sort of created this tech council or to frame these together, is use a framework that we've developed on how would you create an assessment rubric for the role. The first thing, and I think there's some delay in our slides, so I'll continue and then the slides can catch up. The assessment framework, the vectors that you want to look at is what role are you hiring for, and then what is the experience level that you are looking to hire for. Early talent, 0 to 2 years of work experience, intern programs, new grads, versus someone that you're looking to hire with 2 to 5 years of work experience versus someone with 5 to 8 or higher. The type of questions or the type of challenge you give them is different. As Vivek shared in the anatomy of a technical interview, problem-solving questions, think about, are very well suited for early talent. It'll be a clear signal around their skills of do they have the correctness and the completeness of being able to answer those type of challenges. The language proficiency will all be very clearly identified for you. But as you start going to more experienced levels of hiring, think of that as a sort of a proxy. If you're targeting or you're looking for engineers with 2 to 5 or 5 to 8 years of work experience, giving them basic problem-solving questions, not something that will give you the right signals, and more importantly, it's not a great candidate experience. The last time I would have solved those type of challenges would have been probably when I was straight out of school. And so I have to go crack open a book to go and remember it. But more importantly, that's not the type of work I'll be doing when I come join you. So you want to use the assessment as an opportunity to also showcase what's the type of work, how big of a problem, how difficult is the problem, that they can sink their teeth into and say, I want to go solve this hard problem. I can get passionate around it. So give them more of a real world challenge that mimics something that's in your code base or something that represents something similar to what they would be doing when they come in. The skills you're looking for someone at the 5 to 8 years of work experience is very different. You're looking more, it's less around the language proficiency. They've proved it being in the industry for those many number of years that they know how to code in the language. They know how to self-teach and go to new languages that are coming out. They know how to work with frameworks. It's more important on how good are they with code review, how good are they with debugging. Those are the kind of things that they're going to be solving because their team's going to come to them and say, we can't solve this debugging challenge that we're having or some bugs that we've created. Help us sort of deconstruct the problem and then reconstruct the solution. So give them something that's more relevant to what work they'll be doing. The duration of the challenge is important as well. Someone coming straight out of a new grad, giving them 60 to 75 minutes, clock is ticking, more competitive programming type of question works really well. That's how they've been studying for the last 4 years in their degree program or in the boot camp they've gone to. But someone who's got 5+ years of work experience, they have other obligations, they probably have a full-time job, they're a passive candidate, asking them that the clock's going to start ticking the minute you start taking the assessment. Not a great experience, give them a day. We've got customers that are giving their candidates an entire week and saying, you pick your time, what best suits you. We're going to give you, you want to be able to read the problem statement, really understand it, deconstruct the problem, construct it back up. So take your time in doing it. It's less about how fast you can code, it's more about your thought process. And so give them the ability to do that. And then lastly, how do you position it? Again, it's important that the hiring managers take a little bit of time, whether they do a little quick video that you can share with the candidate, let them know how they should prep for the test, what the experience is going to look like, why you're asking them to take the test, and more importantly, what's the process once you take the assessment? What happens when you come on site? Are you going to continue with the test or give them an opportunity to walk through the thought process? What are the different type of skills you're going to assess using different techniques when you come on site? So that level of effort, it's 15 minutes. It's a short phone call. It's worth doing with candidates that have more experience. You have to sell them on the idea of coming to work for you. And it's not just about the company. It's also the team they're going to be working with, the philosophy, the engineering, sort of what are the practices that you have. So these are all important elements when you create that using that framework. How it represents itself for the role is using the framework. I just picked one. We've done this for lots of different roles that we power. We just picked one to show you if we were to take that framework and apply it for a back-end engineer, we know the role. These are the skills that you will typically look for in a back-end engineer. So making sure that the tech council comes together, agrees on these, adds additional skills that they may be looking for, or prioritize what skills you're looking for from a back-end engineer, and then looking at the experience level, and then you can pick questions from our library or go build your own custom questions that map to those skills so that you get the right signals. And that's sort of the upfront work that the council comes together, that we facilitate, and then through our guidance builds out this rubric. And once the rubric's built, only then you actually start doing this in-app and actually building the assessment. Then the level of effort to build the assessment is really small, right? Because you've already done all this thinking beforehand. So to encapsulate what would an enterprise rollout look like, We have to do a little bit of account configuration. We're SaaS cloud-based web-based application. There isn't any customization needed. It's just config. Really simple. Set up single sign-on. Make sure that you set up your templates, etc. So very small amount of work that needs to be done from a configuration standpoint. Create the tech council. Agree on this rubric. Build out a test. Calibrate the test. It's always good practice to have a group of engineers that have recently been hired for the role to take the assessment. Bring them in together. Don't have to do this on their own time. Do it over a lunch or like a mini hackathon, and have them take the test. And we'll be able to then glean some really key data from it. If we expect candidates to take the test in an hour and our own engineers are taking 3 hours, something's wrong, right? We need to go revisit the questions, or we need to make sure that we're giving the candidates enough amount of time. I did this with my team on a test that we created for solution engineering. As a hiring manager, of course, I want the best. So I picked the hardest questions. They didn't do too well on it, but I can't, and it was a good signal for me that if my own team is not able to do well on this test, I can't expect candidates to do well. And the reason for having an assessment is not just to screen out, but to also screen in candidates. So this internal calibration is a key milestone that we do with our customers. And then once we've got a well-calibrated test, then we can start giving it to candidates. Well, you also want to do another calibration session after a cohort of candidates have taken the test. Their feedback, how long they're taking on the test, how well they're doing, the score distribution, are all important data points that we will use with you to calibrate and make sure you have a highly calibrated test. Once that's done, the next phase is interviewing. So similar, what questions you want to use for interviewing. Once they've taken the assessment, they come on site or you're doing a remote interview with them. Having a set of questions, sort of creating your question bank and making sure that that is highly calibrated and everyone is consistent in using those questions versus every interviewer or hiring manager has their own sort of questions in their back pocket, which sort of breaks all the compliance as well as the consistency you're looking for. And then continuing and optimizing for it. Fire and forget is not a good method with assessments. You have to constantly go, we do monthly health checks and Rubric will go into more detail on that as to how we're using deep data sets that we have around making sure that the tests are giving you the outcomes that you're looking for in terms of signals around the skills. So monthly health checks, quarterly business reviews, and definitely a mid-year test refresh or earlier if the test starts degrading in its outcome. So that's sort of the rollout methodology that we recommend and we take our customers through for large sort of global rollouts in the enterprise. Another aspect that we touched on earlier that's important is, are we enterprise ready? There's definitely, so there's 4 things that you will typically look for any application or any platform that you bring into your your world. And this extends first and foremost being, is it secure? So information security, data security are important aspects of this. This is data that needs to be, we need to make sure that it's highly secure. You want to make sure that all of your users, whether they're recruiters, hiring managers, etc., I'm not saving, they're not having another set of passwords that are saved by me. If you choose to do that, they're highly secure, so you don't have to worry about that. But you typically want to make sure that it is single sign-on enabled so that your users are not having to remember another password. Their one corporate login gives them access to HackerRank as well. Integrations are secure, so if you're integrating with ATS that you use, if you're using our pre-built integrations, that everything that's being transferred over the internet is secure, so it's encrypted, so that's important. We, of course, do all of that, but these are things that you definitely want to look for, or your InfoSec team will look for as well. The second is going to be around availability. You want the system to be available. Your enterprises are now large global organizations. Your candidates, your sourcing come from all over the globe. You want to make sure that regardless of what time of the day in their local zone, HackerRank is available to them, and they're not having any issues with connecting, using the application, using the IDE. And so high availability of the application is pretty much an industry standard that you're looking for within the enterprise. The next one is around scale. Can we scale? And so just to give you an idea of scaling, right now we have an assessment taken on our platform every 8 seconds. So we've been able to work with, so think about it, if we've got customers that are looking to hire 4,000 engineers in a year across the globe. If you start looking at a multiplier of 10x just on how many need to take an assessment, So if you look at your conversion rate, it's a massive scale operation that we run and can support as much as you want to throw at it, we can support it. And that's an important sort of measure that you should be looking at and saying, is this application going to scale with my needs? Especially when we do more seasonal type of hiring, when it's like university hiring seasons, it's insane at the rate of which how many individuals are actually taking an assessment at the same time with an hacker rank. And then lastly, the topic that I, believe it or not, actually get excited about, the most boring one, is compliance. Because I'm also the acting CISO at HackerRank, so I enjoy this piece, making sure that we are compliant with ISO standards around InfoSec, GDPR. That's something that we're all well aware of, and now all have it taped to the back of our eye because of what we've gone through over the year to make sure that we're compliant. It is important. Candidates do have the right to be forgotten, and so we have to be able to support it. And then, of course, here in the US, we've got the EEOC compliance that's required as well around validation. These are all things that an enterprise application should be able to support. And it should be effortless for you to have to make sure that we help you with your compliance or make you compliant.
Cool. Thank you, Gaurav. So that's those are the important parts of rolling the application across the enterprise. And just to add on to that, one of the things that we put up in the poll earlier was about the diversity goals. Firstly, I'm really impressed that 100% of the audience are able to hit the diversity goals. So there's definitely something for me to learn. I'd love to learn from all of you. But one of the things that we have found to be pretty effective, which can help in diversity, but we're not calling it like a diversity feature, but more like an unconscious bias, is even after you share the code challenge reports to hiring managers, when you attach along with the resume, there is still a lot of bias to look at the resume. And when you look at a resume, you look at the name, and then you have a picture. Okay, is this male, female, which part of the country, which part of the world you are from, and then which school did you go to, who are the professors that you took classes from. And you sort of form an impression, and then you go ahead and look at the code challenge. So what we've started to build on is what we call as this unconscious bias feature, where we kind of obfuscate every single personal detail of the candidate, and all that you can see as a hiring manager is their code. And you'll be surprised to see how much of an uptake you're going to see in terms of a more diverse pool of candidates that you're going to continue to interview because of this. So this is something that we've enabled, and if you're a HackerRank customer or if you're planning to use HackerRank, of course, it's something that we could work on as well. And then the last part of this, what we wanted to do was, okay, now that you have an anatomy of the technical interview, and you also know how to implement this across your entire organization, which is building an enterprise-ready platform, how do you continue to sustain this at scale? So one of the things that you probably care a lot about, which we have seen from a lot of customers, one is what is the power of your brand, which is how do developers view your company when they're going to apply? What is your technical process, interview process? What are the interesting challenges that they work on? What is the power of your brand? So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is how effective is your interview process? So let's say I express my interest, which is part of the brand. Now, once I express the interest, how streamlined is your interview process? At a high level, if you're able to do a really good job on having a very strong brand amongst developers and a very tight interview process, then you have a lot of problems that you can solve in technical recruiting. So we measure those two aspects by these two metrics. One is called the candidate response score, which I'm going to walk through in a little bit. And the second one is the assessment quality score. So candidate response score is essentially a way for you to figure out of the people who you sent out an invite or a challenge, what percentage of people actually attempted the challenge, How many of them spent time in the challenge? And Gaurav talked about the Tech Council and best practices of questions. All of those go, all of those make their way into increasing the candidate response score. So here is an example of a dashboard that we actually present to customers. If you look at it, there is a candidate participation rate, which is, hey, if you send out an invite to 100 people, how many of them actually even attempt the test, like log in and go ahead? How many of them even log into the test? The second one is the candidate feedback, which is after a test, how do they rate your test? Do they give you a 4-star, a 5-star, or 2-star? And then what percentage do candidates complete your assessment? And then there is a test attempt duration, because like Gaurav mentioned earlier, for different roles and seniorities and different companies, you need to make sure that you can give an optimal duration for your challenge. And what's the score distribution? Do all of them get zeros? Do all of them get 100%? Is there like a bell curve? What's the ideal score distribution? So we take into account all of these different parameters. And given that we assess one in every 8 seconds, we actually, in the last 12 months, 20% of developers who change jobs went through HackerRank. So that's the market size and the market penetration that we have. And we have 1,200 customers across all of these different industries. So using that data set, we customize what's the ideal value for your industry, for your size, and then tell you, which is the first or the second column, and then tell you how well your assessments are performing against each of them, and which ones are green, which ones are red, and give you specific directions of, hey, here are ABC things that you need to do to improve your response that you can get from candidates. For example, when you send an email, what's the subject line that you use? Who calls the candidate? Does a recruiter call a candidate? Does a hiring manager call a candidate? Depending upon the seniority that you're doing, do you follow the same process for a university versus a mid-level? We give you specific instructions on how you can continue to get a better understanding of the candidate response score on this. So this is an example of a QBR deck, for example, that we do it every quarter with a customer on this. Using this, we launched sometime late September, a few weeks back, what we call as a tech talent matrix, which essentially takes the two axes that we just talked about, the candidate response score, which is an indication of your brand power, the assessment quality score, which is an indication of how tight of an interview process that you run. And we took a weighted average between these two scores and tell you in which quadrant that you fall and how, with respect to your competitors across the board. And obviously we want all our customers to be in the top right. Well, that's not statistically possible because, if everybody's in the top right, then we'll have another quadrant. And we actually give you, again, clear guidelines or steps on how you can go from one quadrant to another. And if you're interested, I can send you where HackerRank stands in the Tech Talent Matrix, but assuming that you actually use our product. So that's an example of a feature that can actually tell you how good you are, where do you stand, and what are some of the things that we can do to get you in the top right. So concluding the presentation, the goal of HackerRank, or the goal, what we want to accomplish with all our prospects and customers, is as you're continuing to scale your organization, you're going to have an infusion of different cultures, people from different companies, different bar. How do you make sure that you can sustain the bar, or more importantly, continue to up-level your bar at scale for an enterprise organization? It's a very, very hard challenge, especially to do that for engineers. And the three things, the first one is, let's design what a good interview process looks like, and how do you go and that's the first one, which is the implement, which talks about the anatomy of the technical interview, the tech council, and the rubric, all of the things that Gaurav and I talked about. The second one is, once you've designed that, how do you roll this out at scale across your organization? And the third one is, okay, now you've implemented and rolled this out. Now, how do you continue to be in the leader quadrant, which is the top right in the Tech Talent Matrix, to make sure that your brand continues to be great and you have a very tight interview process? So that's how our, that's what we can help you do, and how we can transform your tech hiring process. That's all I had. That's all we had for today. So I'll just pause there to see if you guys have any questions or anything that we can answer.
Yeah. So audience members, we'd love to hear your questions about today's presentation or your experience regarding some of these these processes. So please use the Q&A dialog box over on the right-hand side of your screen to submit your questions. And we'll go ahead and open those up to the floor. So it looks like we've got a couple of them coming in. So the first one is, will there be a recording of the program available? Yes, we will send that out later this afternoon as soon as we've got it cleaned up and ready to go. Also, let's see here. Okay, we'll give everybody a quick minute to get their questions in. So we've got another question coming in, and that one is in regards to alignment between recruiting managers or recruiting professionals and hiring managers. So do you, according to your experience, how long should the recruiting process take for each level of engineer?
So we typically see our customers when they are using the phone interview, phone screening method. It takes up to 9 weeks from the time you start talking to the candidate, and you go through a resume screen. The TA team does, well, the recruiter will do a phone screen. Then the hiring manager will do a phone screen for skills, which isn't a great experience. Then decide to bring them on site, probably make them go through 8 or 9 interviews while on site. It's usually a 9-week process, which is it's a pretty intense process and time commitment you're asking from candidates. By eliminating phone screens, which don't give you great signals on skills from a tech hiring standpoint or from a tech interview standpoint, and using the take-home assessment, and then using more pair programming or collaborative programming as part of the next round, we've seen customers go down to 4 weeks in that process. It's a shaving off 5 weeks of that entire process, which is great both from a candidate experience standpoint as well as from making sure that you're meeting your hiring goals and you're making this a less touch process in terms of how many times you're having to touch the candidate or the commitment they have to make to go through a 9-week process with you.
All right, thank you. So next question we hear. Where do you think some of the best places to recruit developers are from? It's very difficult to get a developer to engage with you on LinkedIn or other social media. What channels have your customers seen success with?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I don't think there's like a silver bullet on this, because if there were, then everybody would probably be hunting the channel, and then it would cease to be a good channel in itself. It's kind of how LinkedIn was there earlier on and where it is right now. So a few things that we have seen our customers do. Number one, and you might actually be surprised, I can guarantee that there are, I don't know the company size that you're in, but there are 10 qualified engineers in your applicant tracking system who have applied over the last 12 months or 24 months who've been completely ignored. A, because hiring manager has rejected the resume. B, for whatever reason, they were not engaged properly. The one thing that we've actually seen is how do you actually use whatever you have? Can you go to your applicant tracking system and engage the candidates? And by the way, you can just give them a simple coding challenge, which is not even like an assessment, but hey, here's a sample of work that you would do if you join the company. And if they do it really well and they're interested, then they can continue to you can continue to engage the process. That's number one. The second one is more about how do you design and define your application process? Like an applicant tracking system, for most part, when it's designed, is like a black hole, which is if I apply, did somebody even receive my resume? Am I going to hear back from someone? Am I qualified for the job? So a lot of our customers have started to use this branding component, which is essentially putting up a public challenge on their careers page for people to go ahead and solve it. I mean, this is not, hey, we need 8+ years of experience. You need to have worked in Java, scalable systems. You need to be able to build a system in half the time with half the money and people that you want. No, it's not a job description of that sort. It's basically telling, here's a real world challenge that we actually work on, and if you're interested, you can go ahead and apply. So it's streamlining your application process. And the third one is the branding that everybody does. There is a level of branding that you can do on HackerRank. There's a level of branding that you can do on LinkedIn, on Glassdoor, on events, on internal employee referrals, and others, which is probably very standard across the board. But if I had to make a real strong change, it would be looking into the tuning up the application process right from the first touch of a candidate and actually going back and looking at your database. I'm very sure that there are a lot of developers who are there who are very qualified. We've seen this work time and again with a ton of our customers.
Thank you. Okay, the next question we have coming in is in regards to the tech talent matrix and the candidate response score and assessment quality score. So when we're looking at areas to improve, what are the benchmarks, the levels that your customers work to achieve?
Yeah, so we actually, as you start using HackerRank, building out the assessment, have candidates start taking the assessment, what we're benchmarking on is your peers. So the 1,200 plus customers that are using HackerRank, an assessment being taken every 8 seconds gives us a ton of data that we're able to then use and create benchmarks from. So, for example, one of the things that we will look at under the candidate response score is it's fine-grained, but you typically look at attempt to invite ratio. That's usually the metric that we've been using in the past and saying, of the number of candidates that you invited to take an assessment for a specific role, what was the attempt rate? An attempt can be, did they take at least one question, right? Because an assessment will have multiple questions. Think of it like a test to the full, with series of questions. And the benchmark we've been maintaining or been looking at and saying 70% or higher is great, right? Is good. It's good and healthy. That's what we've seen gives you the right outcomes. However, if you were to go out and hit 1,000 candidates to get to a 70% or higher attempt to invite ratio, there is a lot more fine-grained tuning that needs to be done. For example, if you send out 1,000 invites and you don't get a 95% or higher open rate of those emails, there is no way you're going to achieve that 70% attempt ratio. If you've got a large drop-off in just candidates opening your email, and it could be something as simple as how well have you constructed the subject line? That's what gets their first attention. You'll get a default one that gets created from HackerRank, but you should be able to, you can go in, you can make it more specific. It'll be the name of your company, the name of the test. We should look at it and actually talk about the role that you're hiring for as that. And that will give you a higher level of open rate. From those that open the email, the invite, how many are actually clicking on the link? Then those that are clicking on the link, how many of them are actually starting the test? And then off that, how many are completing at least one question? How many are actually completing the entire test? That's an entire funnel. So think of it as a funnel. And every stage in that funnel, we have benchmark data and each sort of correlates to the other. If you don't hit the first benchmark, you will not hit the next benchmark. So that's how the benchmarking data is constructed and is available to you. And so what you're seeing in that, when we do sort of these monthly health checks or the QBRs, what we'll be showing you is how are you performing? How is every benchmark or every milestone, how are your assessments performing compared to your peers of 1,200 of them, and that number keeps growing. So the goalpost keeps changing because the better they do and you do, we make it harder, right? We want it to be that you're getting all the outcomes you're looking for. So that's how the benchmarks are set.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got another question coming in around the difference between what a technical recruiter should assess for versus a hiring manager. So from a young new technical recruiter and is interested in how to assess people for a technical role outside of the technical aspects.
Yeah, I would say the way things we see shift is a technical recruiter assesses the importance or is the interest of a candidate to work on the problem, the technology, and the mission real. That's a very, very strong strength to have. The hiring manager then goes ahead and evaluates, say, whether whatever you said on skills that you can do A, B, C, is it actually true or not? So that's how we are starting to see a big change of the roles that used to happen, because maybe 2 or 3 years back, And maybe it's still, even now, it's common for a hiring manager to give the technical recruiter a set of questions and say, hey, can you go ahead and ask these, and here are the answers. I would actually strongly discourage that unless and otherwise you're a developer yourself and transform into a technical recruiter, because from a developer perspective, like what if you give I mean, each question can have like 50 different variations of the same answer. Like if you give a different variation, are you able to understand that this is pretty much the same? Are you able to ask follow-on questions? Which are all the interactions that you can ask with a hiring manager. So people have stopped to or reduced this kind of a model and moved more into, are you really in it because you're passionate about the product, the technology, and the mission? Can I really assess that? Have you worked on similar ones? And okay, now a hiring manager can assess how deep you are. What's your how deep expertise do you have on each of the technology and skills that you mentioned?
Okay, thank you. All right, audience members. So we've got questions that are slowing down a little bit. If anybody has anything that they'd like to ask during today's program, please feel free to use the Q&A dialog box to get those entered in. Give everybody just one more second to see if we have anything else coming in. Okay, and with that, I think that's the end of the questions for today. So we'll go ahead and wrap up a little bit early. Audience members, please be sure to take our short survey regarding today's program. We'd love to get your feedback on today's event. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we do have another event happening on November 8th. You can join us either for the live stream if you're not located in the San Francisco Bay Area, or please join us in person. There'll be links for those events over in the resource portion of today's console. And Gaurav, Vivek, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate your insight and support.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining the webinar, and please let us know if you have any questions or if you can help in the implementation of HackerRank. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.